Right. Well, I'm going to welcome everyone. My name is Sandy Ferguson. I'm a senior advisor for economy initiatives that we have. Jacob Herton, our manager of bioeconomy initiatives, is going to get into a little more of the detail around what we do here at Foresight on the bioeconomy. A quick word, Foresight is leading clean tech accelerators, helping the ecosystem connect across government, academia, strategics, and investor community. And we're really pleased to have a partnership today with the UBC Bioproducts Institute. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Richard Sohn, Director of Mission. Take it over.
With gratitude and respect, we acknowledge the lands on which Foresight operates are the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. With that, I'll pass it to Richard to introduce and talk a bit more about the Bioproducts Institute.
Yeah, super. Just a quick introduction to anyone that may not yet know about us. The Bioproducts Institute is a global research excellence institute at UBC, which is a big deal. It means it's the highest level institute at the university and brings across campus involving multiple researchers from multiple faculties. If you want to just flip to the next slides, Jacob, please. Yeah. Really what we're really trying to do within the context of the Institute is create a ecosystem that helps accelerate innovation, accelerate impact. And of course, that's all about people, as we all know, getting the right people together to help generate those new ideas and train future employees and entrepreneurs, and of course support it with the appropriate infrastructure and systems. So we're really excited about it. It's about a 3.5-year-old institute now, really starting to make some pretty exciting developments and some really good, exciting sort of traction in terms of impact. So certainly welcome anybody to get involved. Next slide, please. We're certainly open to it. One of the great things, as many of you already know, UBC is a large, multiple disciplinary institute, which is super exciting. It allows organizations like ourselves to leverage expertise in a whole variety of areas, everything from business to sociology to psychology, if you like, and disciplines multifaceted. So when we can drill in on a specific topic area, we can typically find somebody on campus who has expertise in that specific area and bring that into the discussion. So super exciting, lots of exciting areas. Of course, as we all know, bioproducts is now impacting everything under the sun, which is just super exciting area to be involved in. And packaging, of course, is, if you go to the next slide, is definitely, oh, sorry, that's just some example papers. On to the next slide. Yeah, packaging is certainly one of the areas that we're very excited about. We anticipate a variety of different topic areas that bio-based solutions are coming into play that we're currently working on, as you can see in that slide. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. And packaging, what I wanted to share, if you go to the next slide, Jacob, please, is we've just recently launched a what we call a cluster. So it's an applied research cluster. And in that context, we're bringing together a whole host of researchers, all the way from land and food systems. Specifically, we have a very exciting development on campus. Abhinav has been championing with his teammates a new food and beverage innovation center, literally being built as we speak. And in that context, the BPI team is partnering with them, bringing kind of, as you can see there, circular packaging solutions and future packaging materials into the mix. And then closing the loop all the way around, of course, is, bringing in, the environmental perspectives, the social perspectives, the economic perspectives, the human factors perspectives, and sort of figuring out how to collectively support the evolution and in next generation of packaging. So super exciting about that, and super exciting that we're able to collaborate with Foresight today, obviously, to bring Rick to you all as one of our guest speakers. And we anticipate we'll be doing future initiatives as well. So, okay, so yeah, feel free, of course, just to reach out happy to support in any way we can. Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly talk a bit about some of the avenues and areas that Foresight operates within, specifically around the bioeconomy today. This webinar is part of our BioNext programming. BioNext is our sector-specific programming for ventures in the forestry and bioeconomy space, looking at sector-specific challenges in that area. Foresight also has a bunch of general programming that is more technology-based, but our bioeconomy program tries to mine and get through a lot of the issues that are faced by the sector. We do that in 6 main ways. The first is sector-specific webinar training, investor introductions, networking events, both in person and online, one-on-one mentoring with our vast stream of EIRs or executives in residence, access to project support, and funding and pilot opportunities. We've been doing this initiative since 2022, and we've had some pretty awesome success since then. I won't go through all the numbers on the screen, but as you can see, we're pretty happy with what we've been able to achieve so far with just 30 companies, and we look to continue doing this into the future. We also support sectors in the agricultural, built, carbon power, and water sectors as well too, in a similar manner. And then last but definitely not least, we'd like to thank our partners, Genome BC, and federal funding provided by the Investments in Forest Industry Transformation Program make BioNext possible, and Climate Connections webinars like this are not made possible without McMaster University, SFU, the University of Victoria Impact Investing Hub, and entrepreneurship at UBC. With that, I'm going to get into our speaker introduction here. And just a quick highlight about how the kind of run of show is going to be for this. So we have Rick with us, who's going to be doing a general discussion about the sector, CKF, and what he sees as some problem areas. But the big point of this webinar is to have an open and good discussion about what problems end users are facing in the sustainable packaging space and how we can identify next steps to kind of accomplish and find solutions for those problems. So this webinar is hopefully a jumping off point for that discussion. At the end, I will have a survey in an email sent out to everyone who's registered to participate today. And with that, I'll be collecting both information on what you think the next steps are and your information in order to participate in future discussions as well. Okay, with that being said, I'd like to introduce Rick Everest, the Director of Sustainability at CKF Inc. Rick holds a BA in Economics from the University of Western Ontario and is a certified black belt in lean operations. He has worked in the food service packaging industry for over 45 years, holding various operational positions, including plant manager, Director of Quality Assurance, Director of Continuous Improvement, and his current role of Director of Sustainability, which he has held for the past 6 years. He has been with CKF Incorporated for 21 years and was previously a board member of the Food Service Packaging Institute and is currently a member of PAC Global's Pacific Regional Leadership Council. We're super excited to have Rick leading our conversation today, and with that, I'll lead it off to him to continue on with his presentation. You're on mute there, Rick.
Make sure I can unmute myself. Okay, well, thank you, Jacob. I just really want to give you a little bit of an agenda item here as to what I'd like to cover today. Obviously, I'd like to do an overview of CKF, the company that I work for, and follow through with CKF sustainability evolution, some of our metrics that we look upon, and then take a look from our perspective and our lens on what the future of food service packaging as we see it. You know, what the regulatory activity is in both Canada and the US that's affecting food service packaging, what the extended producer responsibility effect is in Canada, maybe just a little bit about that, and then the marketplace activity and what the world wants, and you know, maybe some idea of where we are as an industry and where industry is actually outstepping regulations, and then follow that up with a few questions. So next slide, please. Just CKF at a glance to give you some information. CKF is a subsidiary of Scotia Investments, and we've been in business in Canada here for 91 years. We were started in 1933. We're a family-owned 4th-generation manufacturer of molded pulp fiber, expanded polystyrene foam, and polyethylene terephthalate, PET, food service and food packaging products. We are the largest manufacturer of single-use fiber plates marketed under Royal Chinette. You may know us from that brand. And a leader in a variety of other fiber, EPS foam, and PET plastic products, including egg cartons, meat trays, produce packs, food trays, carryout trays, and containers. You may see our products at Tim Hortons with our 4-cup carriers. You may see our products in the supermarkets with our fiber and polystyrene meat trays. We produce roughly 3 billion food service or food packaging products within Canada for Canadian and export markets. And approximately 2 billion of these units are made from EPS and PET substrates, with about 1 billion units made here in the West. We employ about 750 workers nationwide. We have 6 manufacturing facilities across Canada, and we produce polystyrene and PET. Our products are manufactured in both BC and Ontario, and molded fiber products are manufactured in BC and Nova Scotia. We also have 2 manufacturing facilities in the US, one in Texas, one in Iowa, under the brand name CKF MFT. And there it's basically dedicated to protective packaging. Next slide, please. So the evolution of sustainability at CKF, although our journey actually started in 1933 as the company, sustainability has always been core to the company business. We did create a formal sustainability program in 2012, our base year. In those days, we called it Planet, People, Profit. And it was kind of blunt. I think those were the 3 main pillars of sustainability at the time. In 2016, we softened our approach a little bit to go to better planet, better communities, and better business, to get away from the idea of being forthright on the profit side. And then now we're morphing into, as of 2022, into environmental social governance, which we see is the current buzz phrase, if you will, for the sustainability movement in corporations. Next slide, please. So under our ESG program and our Better Business, Better Planet, Better Community, we look at really 14 metrics to gauge our performance. We look at all of our products want to be recyclable or compostable, waste diversion, water conservation, greenhouse gas emissions from our facilities, energy reduction, our suppliers and our supply chain, transportation greenhouse emissions, our recycled content, and our packaging reduction. We also look at a community side, things for employee engagement, community involvement through charities, etc., and volunteer work, and a safe work environment for our employees. And under the Better Business heading, we look at, obviously, the cost reduction and lean manufacturing, sales growth, and supplier integrity. So what is the future of food serviceware packaging, from our lens anyway? Next slide. Certainly, there's lots of regulatory activity going on within Canada and within the US. To give you a little bit of background, there was an order in council added to adding plastic manufactured items to SEPA. Maybe you've heard this on the news, et cetera, et cetera. This was as a result of a commitment that the federal government had made during the campaign of 2019, that they would be wanting to ban single-use plastic food packaging products. When they came into power, they realized that most of the purview for managing solid waste is in the provinces, and they had no vehicle or no way that they could actually follow through with their promise. So in order to do that, they had to add plastic manufactured items into the Canadian Environmental Protection Act in the list of toxic chemicals, and then use the enforcement through that to ban whatever they wanted to ban. That happened in May of 2021. Coming from that, there was the single-use plastics packaging prohibition regulations that came out in 2022. And that, as we all know, there are 6 items that were banned. And in our case, one of them involving polystyrene food service items, the sale of those and the manufacture for sale within Canada taking effect in 2022. And the manufacture for sale for exports will be taking effect in December of 2025. And after the single-use packaging prohibitions happened, they also modernized SEPA. SEPA hadn't been touched since 1999. And so they went through, passed a bill which updated SEPA, which took the word toxic out of the list of toxic elements, and they call it Schedule 1, Schedule 2. So now Schedule 1 elements are those that are considered toxic and are on the banned list. Schedule 2 are those that may become toxic. So they've updated and modernized the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. Now, in the background, there was a challenge to to putting plastic manufactured items into SEPA Schedule 1, the original 1999 SEPA. It was challenged through RPUC, which is Responsible Plastic Users Coalition. And they went to the federal court, and the federal court came back with a ruling that putting plastic manufactured items onto SEPA's top toxic list was both unreasonable and unconstitutional. This happened just the end of last year. So ECCC are now appealing that federal ruling, but it has had some consequences throughout the industry and throughout the current plans of the federal government. Next slide, please. So what's happened? What's currently happening? Well, currently federal government is implementing a federal plastics registry. As a matter of fact, they issued a notice of intent to issue a section 46 notice for federal plastics registry to create an inventory of data. So what they do in advance is they'll compel industry to start recording those things that are going to be needed for the federal plastics registry. And it seems though that ECCC are committed to move forward with this federal plastics registry, although this will in some cases be a duplication of what's already being recorded through the EPR process in the provincial levels. And they did have two other regulations that they'd started in 2023, and they had hoped to have them into Gazette Part 1 by the end of 2023, but they've been delayed, and they've been delayed because of the federal court appeal. One was the recycled content and labeling regulations, and the other was the pollution prevention or P2 planning notice, which would require the largest grocery retailers to develop a plan to eliminate primary food plastic packaging. So those two ones are kind of on hold right now, but they would, when they come to fruition, if they come to fruition, it will change the playing field as far as food service packaging is concerned. And then, of course, we have ECCC's International Negotiating Committee, which has published its zero draft text outlining an internationally legally binding global agreement on plastics pollution. And ECCC will be hosting the fourth meeting of the International Negotiating Committee in Ottawa in April of this year. So lots going on from a regulatory process in Canada. Next slide, please. At the provincial level, there's also lots of action, and I'm just showing here the one that is most recent here in BC that came into effect as of December 31st, 2023. And it actually went further than the federal regulatory activity as far as banning food service products. The regulatory activity of the federal regulatory ban was for food service products that didn't require any further processing. That would be like sandwiches and materials you would take home from a restaurant, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas this ban, it takes it even further. It takes it into not only what you would need no further processing, but it could take into consideration those that you would take home and cook. So it would include meat trays, egg cartons, and these type of things. Also, it includes compostable plastic, biodegradable plastic, and of course, what we're concerned with is polystyrene foam, as in the ban. Through great lobbying and persistence, we were able to get a delay in the meat tray side of this ban for British Columbia, and the government has now pushed that out until July 1st, 2030, before that ban takes place. But everything else is officially banned as of December 31, 2023. Next slide, please. So other regulatory activity, getting away from the plastic side of things and going into paper and molded fiber. Obviously, the big topic of conversation is PFAS. And here's a quick definition of what PFAS is in case you haven't heard it, but it's basically fluorinated organic chemicals that are inside packaging. And it is basically fluorinated chemicals in the packaging industry are usually used for oil and grease resistant coatings. And this concern, I guess, or raise in awareness is now happening both in Canada and the US. Although there's no federal regulation here in Canada, ECCC has issued a draft state of where they think it should be going. And I would expect to see that regulations will be following before the end of the year. Next slide, please. In the States, we also have actions going on with foam and with food service packaging, plastic, not only foam, but other plastics. There is 2 bills that are at the federal level. One is called the Farewell to Foam Act, which basically focuses on polystyrene foam food service products. This act was introduced in 2023. Whether it will come to fruition is still debatable, but it certainly is on the horizon. And then another act that is also introduced last year that hasn't been certified or attained in law yet is the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. And this one here sets ambitious recycling targets and creates extended producer responsibility programs to set aggressive source reduction goals and ban non-recyclable food service products, single-use and plastic bags nationwide. So both of those, if they did come to fruition, would have great impact on the food service industry in the States. And then at state level, you can see here that there's just numerous amounts of legislation going on in each state and each municipality. You see here 230 proposed pieces of legislation involving bans to polystyrene, food service packaging or bags, et cetera, in at least 34 states. Next slide, please. So again, on the PFAS trail, there is a No Toxics in Food Packaging Act ban that would at the federal level, and this would declare the 5 classes of substances as unsafe for food contact, including, as you say there, PFAS and bisphenols, et cetera, across the full gambit. And that hasn't come into effect yet, but it's on the table. Regulations banning intentionally added PFAS is currently in place in 12 states, with 5 more states coming into play within the next year and a half. And I did put in a little link there that would say, if you're interested, you can get what the PFAS situation is by state. Maybe later on when this material goes through, we can change that to the actual website that I've identified there. Next slide, please. So a little bit of EPR 101. This may be new to some or maybe old business, but at least it sets the groundwork for what extended producer responsibility is. It is a policy approach where producers are given financial and/or physical responsibility for a product which is extended to the post-consumer phase of a product's life. EPR shifts the responsibility and the costs of recycling to obligated producers and away from taxpayers and government. And in Canada anyway, the producer is defined as the brand owner and/or first importer of a product. So food service packaging, as we talked earlier, falls into the EPR category of printed paper and packaging. Next slide, please. Following on top of EPR, there is what's called a Producer Responsibility Organization, or PRO. And while producers may be individually responsible for their regulatory obligations, they're also able to join producer responsibility organizations, which act on their behalf to administer the system to collect, process, and market their designated materials. Examples of PRO activities include developing and entering into material collection contracts, providing performance reporting to the oversight governmental organization. And in Canada right now, there are 5 main PROs that are in existence. There's Circular Materials, which encompasses several of our provinces, which would be Alberta, British or Ontario, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and just most recently the Yukon. There's also Recycle BC, Multi-Material Stewardship Manitoba, Multi-Material Stewardship Western, and Eco Enterprises Quebec. So those are the 5 main pros within Canada. Next slide, please. This is a little schematic that sort of shows how it all fits together. The provincial government is responsible for, creating the legislation and creating the legislative regulations that would guide the EPR system. The producer then is, or obligated producer then is responsible to adhere to the provincial government regulations, and they can either create a program on their own and deal directly with the government, submit their plan to the government directly, or they can work through a producer responsibility organization. And then further down the system, the pro can either contract with the municipal governments, and then they coordinate the collection and the recycling, and then the sale of the recycled products for the individual producer that's obligated through the system. They would use, in the case of British Columbia anyway, they often use a logistics agent or a service provider like Green for Life. We've seen their trucks out there that would coordinate all of the collection, and they'd make sure the trucks go from what households to what MRF, from what MRF to what recycling stream that would go to, and then to the final sale. And what we're talking about here with EPR for the most part is household collection. This includes like Blue Box and your drop-off depots. ICI, or industrial, commercial, and institutional is not included in current most EPRs, although in BC there is some movement towards including ICI in our EPR programs. So the weeds get pretty thick as you start digging into what's happening out in the marketplace. Next slide, please. So what's happening in Canada? As I said before, EPR programs for printed paper and packaging have been or are being established in 8 provinces and 1 territory. Programs in Newfoundland and PEI are still pending. And what's happening also, and there was a lot of clatter about this a few years ago, about how different EPR programs had different callings for what they would collect and what they would not collect. And there's a national integration of Blue Box in Canada that is actually occurring right now. It's being, leadership group is being established through a collaboration of the major provincial producers, which I'd said earlier, and their responsibility PROs, Circular Materials, Recycle BC, MMSM, and MMSW. Quebec has opted to not formally participate, but they have signed a memorandum of understanding for support and collaboration in the list of materials that would be collected through Blue Box organizations. Next slide, please. In the States, EPR has not been as welcomed or as forthcoming as what's happened in Canada. Canada is although we normally follow Europe, we are a leader in North America. In states so far, there have only been 4 states that have established EPR programs to date. Those are Oregon, California, Colorado, and Maine, and Maryland is pending. And I understand Illinois is now coming on stream as well. In the States, a little bit different activity. Rather than multiple pro organizations, there seems to be one sort of federal or statewide organization that will look after the interests of producers. It's called Circular Action Alliance, and they've emerged to represent obligated producers. In each state, the definition of producer is slightly changed, and it's not as simple as it is in Canada. They've actually made a hierarchy of responsibilities that filter all the way down to the manufacturer. So a little bit different in the way that the pros are set up and the way that the regulations are being implemented. The regulations are normally type of omnibus type regulations, much larger and more inclusive than what's happening in Canada. They include bans and other restrictions that maybe aren't included in the EPR programs in Canada. California obviously seems to be most aggressively pursuing this with single-use packaging bans for various substrates, and only listing of substrates that are acceptable for sale and use within California. And if you're interested, the bills involved are Senate Bill 54 and Senate Bill 343, which you can Google and check up. Circular Action Alliance has requested that if you are a producer and you are operating within these states, that you register with them by July 1st, 2024. Next slide, please. So, what the world wants. There, I'm trying to give you a little bit of an overview of what's happening out there. There's the political activity. This is kind of the consumer and the customer and the supplier activity or distributor activity. So what does the world want as far as through the lens of CKF? We're seeing that the world wants reduction in plastic use and plastic packaging. They want to move to alternative substrate for their packaging. And in Canada, especially supported through the Canada Plastics Pact, there's been the development of what's called the Golden Design Rules of packaging. And there's actually 9 rules that they've set out that are being adopted by the major retailers and major companies, and we'll see that later on who's involved. But these rules are very specific, and they're actually trying to define what would be the perfect state to make food service packaging more readily available for recycling, more easily recycled, and easier to handle in the environment. 2 of the rules that affect CKF, of course, is that rule number 2 is the removal of problematic elements from packaging. That means that's basically expanded polystyrene or polystyrene products. And I think what's included in this is also bioplastics. And then the other area is an increase in recycling value for PET thermoform trays and other PET thermoform packaging. So those 2, there's the yin and the yang. The one is taking away and the one is added from our perspective. Next slide, please. Oh, there we are. And so you can see that there are some heavyweights that do support the Golden Design Rules here in Canada. And certainly you can see there Canadian Tire, General Mills, all the big players are here. Loblaws, Maple Leaf, Kruger, McCain, certainly some big players that are getting behind what they want as far as packaging supplies. That is the end of where I'm at for today. And like it says there, my good friend Red Green, we're all in this together. So I think it's good that we have this type of conversation and that we are able to communicate our thoughts. And I'm happy to share some of my insight into what's going on out in the marketplace. You can get further information about CKF at that website shown there. And not only CKF is only one of a family of companies that is owned by Scotia Investments Limited. And certainly if you go on that website, you'll get a broader picture of where we are and what our environmental background is. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rick. That was a great presentation, a really great overview of the industry. I think the unfortunate disconnect between you and Red Green is that I don't think duct tape would make a good food service packaging. I think research has shown it's not very friendly to not being single use. But yeah, on other sides, they're definitely good to go. So what we're gonna do for the discussion bit here, if you could just raise your hand if you have a comment or question or discussion thing that you would like to bring up. I will close the presentation for now. Or do you want to mention this recommended reading first there, Rick?
Well, this is interesting. It basically is because plastics, and this is for all you plastics people out there, is that plastics is such a maligned substrate that's out there right now, and maybe not rightfully so. And I think Krista Armit is a PhD and a scientist who's investigated a lot of the myths and facts around plastics. And in his book, The Plastics Paradox, he talks about those. And it's really quite interesting reading in that, he does show that there are a lot of myths out there, a lot of misinformation that's prevalent in the marketplace. and he tries to bring that into perspective as to where we're at. So I think it's really good reading. It's not the be all and end all, but it certainly is one perspective that is very interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm just gonna close the presentation so we can see everyone here. If we can unspotlight here, Nisha, just so we can get everyone here. Perfect. Cool. So I will start it off here. I see Joe put a comment in the chat. Joe, would you like to speak to that, or would you like me to do it for you?
I'll go ahead and speak to it.
Okay, so hello, Rick. Is the move away from plastics having unintended negative impacts on the environment, economy, and society that you could comment on?
Well, there are certain things that are happening right now, Joe, that I think is interesting in that they're finding, or at least I've read several articles lately on some of the bag bans in the States that are delivering the absolutely opposite of what they were intended to do. They're finding that there's more plastic going to the landfill. There's more plastic being diverted or not being diverted, but going into landfills, which is not what it was intended to do. So some of the things that we're looking at are unexpected, I guess, but they certainly are coming to the forefront.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Priyanka, you have your hand up. I'll let you go next.
Yeah. Hi, Rick. Thanks for the presentation. You had mentioned that obviously Canadian regulations are moving away from expanded polystyrene foam, but what is the sentiment on bioplastics? Could you maybe give any insight on that?
Well, I think bioplastics is certainly, it's in the middle. And that's where I think regulations are really trying to eliminate those items that aren't entirely 100% compostable or entirely 100% recyclable, because bioplastics are not, there can be contamination to the recycling stream, and they're the issue with compostability. And I think the challenge is, can we get third-party certification of compostability through BPI or BNQ or Cedar Rim or wherever we want, or Cedar Grove, wherever we want to, whatever we can get there. And that's only the first step as far as the government regulation goes. It's not only that you get the certification, is it actually being composted anywhere? Like in BC, of the 8 compostable, commercial compostable sites in BC, they will not accept bioplastics. Other entities in the States and throughout Canada will accept, but certainly right now in BC, we can't put bioplastics into our green bin. I mean, that would be the opportunity, is if there's some way that we can cross that threshold to where commercial composters would accept the product, and I think that would make it more acceptable in government regulation. And I guess I would say to the group here that one of the things that hopefully my presentation tries to add is that there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of government regulation, a lot of decisions are being made. Awareness is the biggest thing the biggest tool that we have. If we can be aware of what's going on and make sure that our thoughts and our comments are put forward, then we have a chance of not letting the end results be negatively impact our businesses and our future.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Next, there's a question in the chat here from CPDAI. Have you looked at alternative fibers than wood?
Yes, we have. We're always looking for alternative fibers because we use obviously we use recycled papers in a lot of our materials. We also are looking at different grasses and different wheat fibers, et cetera, like that. We have not been successful in finding anything to replace either recycled papers and or wood products as it stands right now on a commercial basis. but we're always interested, and we're experimenting and always interested to work and collaborate with alternate fiber supply.
Great. And Richard, do you want to speak a bit to more to the projects you were talking about there?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of activity going on, broadly speaking, with alternative fibers. Things like hemp and wheat straw are the two that are probably the most active from what we're seeing. They both, as to Rick's point, they all have their own unique kind of characteristics, which sometimes can make it challenging for specific applications, or sometimes it's an advantage. But I think we'll see more and more of that as time goes on. We're starting to see the agricultural industry, I would say, maybe wake up to the fact that they have this resource that could be utilized without detrimentally impacting the environment and the sustainability of their operations. Historically, of course, they've been mostly focused on, and rightly so, focused on producing food. But now we're starting to see that there's these additional opportunities. So I think we'll see more and more of it.
Yeah, not only that, Richard, I think that, recycled papers, which is our source of fiber for a lot of the materials we make, it's diminishing every day. We read about another paper that goes under. Just the supply of paper products and recycled products is getting harder to get at, through the supply. So obviously, if you're concerned about your future, you definitely want to be involved in advancing different types of substrates and different types of fiber.
Sandy, do you want to speak to that? Or I can as well. You're on mute.
Okay, is that good?
Yeah, you're good.
My keyboard was stuck and my internet is unstable. But Rick, just interested in your view on price performance aspects of adopting more molded fiber as a plastic replacement. There is a lot of biomass fiber available in British Columbia, as you may be aware of. Of course, companies are reluctant to make the investments to produce these products unless they know that there's market adoption. So interested in kind of your views on where we're at on that.
Well, because usually molded fiber uses about more water, and let's just put it this way, uses a lot more water, uses a lot more materials. To have the same strength as a plastics material, it will use more fiber. So they're saying that it will actually cause more greenhouse gas emissions. So normally the industry uses about a 3 or a 4 to 1 ratio. It's about 3 to 4 times more expensive to replace a plastic product with a molded fiber product. Keeping that in mind, some customers are willing to pay that, and certainly if they are, we're willing to supply it for them. So, but that is the reality, is that no matter what, these paper, molded fiber type of alternatives are definitely much more expensive. We're seeing that some of the early adopters in retail. Now, I don't know if you've been into the local restaurants lately, but I know just the other day I was at a restaurant where they're charging me 50 cents a container, for my take home, and 25 cents a bag to take my product home, which was never done previously when you had a plastics clamshell. So yeah, cost is a definite issue, and obviously our customers, we're a B2B type business, our customers don't want any more cost, but unfortunately we can't stay in business unless we pass along the cost it takes to manufacture. And so yes, there is a real cost impact to changing substrates.
And I wonder, you may be able to answer this, or perhaps Richard or one of the researchers on the call. I mean, what's our biggest technological challenge right now in getting that cost down?
Energy. Energy is a big one. And that's one of the exciting developments. And Rick, I don't want to speak too much to what you folks are up to, but there is a movement, for example, in the molded pulp area, to move from a wet-based solution to a dry-based solution, which will significantly reduce energy consumption. to produce a molded pulp. So I think there's some promising technologies that are coming down the pipeline that could really make a difference. But that's typically it. That's probably the number one factor, I would say. And then, of course, fiber is becoming more competitive. There's just more and more demand for it, and globally, it's really kind of getting to that point where large scale industries are using fibers for pretty much everything now, natural fibers. I mean, we're seeing it in textiles. There's some huge, exciting developments going on in Europe using fibers to produce textiles, for example. So bigger and bigger demand as time goes on for fiber. So I think that's going to be a challenging factor for us as well. But hopefully to counter that, we will get better and better at reusing, recycling, so that we're keeping those feedstocks in the economy for absolutely as long as possible.
I think the other factor here is with fiber, especially, that a lot of the fiber that we collect, if you look at years ago, we would collect. That was our KPI for recycling. That was our measurement: how much we collect, how much we ship offshore, and we were shipping out of the port of Vancouver 45 to 50 containers full of paper, recycled papers, to China. We're shipping it across the ocean. China are making paper packaging products from it and shipping it back. And no one is even calculating the greenhouse gas emissions of just that very thing. So people go home feeling good about themselves that I've taken home this package, and yet the history behind it is unknown. It could be if it's come from China, it could, the greenhouse gas emissions might be 5 to 10 times what you would think of even a plastics or a bioplastics product is that's locally grown. So there's lots of issues around that. I think the cost issue, if we can get our hands around that, even with the issue with in industry, is that wrapped up in the production of molded fiber and non-plastic products is a lot of capital investment. Like, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's why there's a reticence to walk away from what you're doing right now, because you've got $200 million invested in equipment that provides this packaging. And so you're not going to be an early adopter when that type of money is. It's not like people are setting up these things in their garages. There's lots of capital investment, and the government really is not stepping up to a great point of view in helping us transition in that cost, or help us to make that transition. It's mostly left on the industries. So some industries will choose to move forward, and some industries will choose just to go away. And we could be, giving our jobs to offshore sites. That's the sad thing of it all.
Great points there, Rick. I'm just going to go on to the next question here in the chat. Michael Sean says, thank you, Rick. Would you walk us through the manufacturing process, including procurement, and what's your thoughts on coconut fiber? Michael, I'm not sure if you have any specific manufacturing process that you'd like to know more about.
I think just like general manufacturing process.
For you're talking for which substrate? For a molded fiber type substrate?
I'm not very familiar on the types, but then like the most common one, I guess. Okay, well, for molded fiber, basically what happens is we take in a raw fiber product, whether it's hardwood pulp, virgin hardwood pulp that we would use in some products. And you need this virgin pulp because the actual fiber size is very important. You get down to the nitty gritty, it's the fibroids. But anyway, what we do is we take the recycled papers or whatever substrate we're using, we pulp it and get it down to a very, very fine consistency. By the time it reaches our machinery, it's about less than a percentage of mass of water. And from that, we dip into that water, or what we call a pond, or the pulp. We dip a screen that has the shape of the product that we want to make on it. And that screen, then we suck water through that screen, and through the process of doing that, we also suck the fibroids and the fiber onto the shape that we want. The water passes on through,
and we deposit it back out into the ocean again, and the fiber stays on the screens. And then it's a question of what type of technology you have as far as curing that fiber. The fiber that's on the screen ends up at about a 35% consistency, about 70% water, for instance, on that fiber. So we have to cure it to make the shape that we want very firm and hard, and make the fibroids within the fiber bond. And so we can go through a long extended oven. It's usually gas fed, and that's why we're using more resources. Or we can heat what they call cure on die, and that's usually an electrical background. So your die comes down, and you heat your tooling with electricity, and you cure your fiber, or you put it through an oven and you cure your fiber that way. Comes out, and we package it up and send it off. And that's basically, in a nutshell, I know it's really a 40,000 foot level, but that's basically how fiber products are made. There's new technologies coming out that, we're making sort of a fluffed pulp fiber that can be, it adheres to a plastic laminate top to get a proper barrier. But, that's still in the early stages.
Great. There's another couple of good questions here, and we're just running a bit close to time, so I want to try and get through them if we can. First, Anubhav, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name there wrong, but would you agree with the point of view that regulators jumped the gun on the move towards single-use plastics bans in absence of a viable scientific invention that provides satisfactory replacements? And a follow-up, will this trend continue in the near future, putting more pressure on industry and academic researchers to innovate? And what is the gap in training of the packaging industry workers that academia may step in to fulfill?
What a great question.
I agree.
It is a great question. And you know what? I think you're bang on that's we as academia and as industry, we need to educate the legislators, because they are making decisions in I believe, quite a lot of void. Sometimes it's self-fulfilling. Sometimes they're being told by the political people to meet some sort of political agenda and not taking science into effect. And it seems like we've walked away from science. And if it makes sense scientifically, and that's why I promote Krista Armitt's book. If it makes sense scientifically, well, then we should support it. What's happened is, I think, governmental regulatory agencies have stopped listening to industry and to scientists, and for whatever reason, and that is really limiting, or they're making some wrong decisions. And certainly, I think as a group, we need to really lobby them to make better decisions. And certainly, I think everyone at this, in this meeting here could do that, whichever way it would go. I think it makes sense as a society that we are guided by science, and that we really need to move forward. How you as academia can educate, I think it's good. It would be great at the educational process to get this information out, to follow science, and to be open-minded as to where that science leads us, and to follow the logic of that. That's where we can help, make sure that we're not perpetuating misinformation.
And I just want to get to Joe's point in here just quickly before the bell. Rick, what would you propose to be done to promote a circular plastic economy and keeping plastic benefits and the value in the economy? And that is opposed to moving away from, or the Canadian government headed the wrong way to the wrong way to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, moving away from lightweight and energy efficient plastics to fiber alternatives through plastic bans.
Thank you, Joe. That's another great question. And I think what we should be doing in just in my little world is, where we failed as far as North America is concerned, is we did not build a robust recycling structure and recycling framework, a back end to handle the end of life of these plastics. These plastics are valuable. I think in the future we'll probably see landfills mined for plastics. And you know what? I think it's a shame that we're eradicating them from society, when really what we need is a robust recycling methodology and the adoption of advanced recycling methods. There's a method now, there's a place in Oregon that takes polystyrene, for instance, and it reduces it back to its original monomer. The original monomer is sent back to a resin processing company. The resin is remade again, and the plastic or the new resin comes back. It's almost indistinguishable between virgin resin, and it holds all the properties that plastic does. In the past, our recycling, if we mix in, let's say, mechanically recycled plastic into the mix, you can only, there's a limit to what you can mix in there. It usually hovers anywhere between 20 to 50%. And because you start losing some of the attributes of your plastic, the strengths, et cetera, et cetera. So by accepting or promoting advanced recycling, we can take it back to the original monomer, make the original recycled material as effective as virgin, hit some of the price points because, you know, right now recycled material is more expensive than virgin material, which is unfortunate. And if we do that, if we went down that path, I think we would keep plastics in the economy, but out of the environment. I mean, no one wants plastics in the environment.
Great. Thanks for that, Rick. And thanks everyone for participating. That was a really lively discussion. I really appreciate it. We are at time now. So as I mentioned, I'll be following up with everyone who joined the call today, everyone who registered, with a few survey questions on what you think the best next steps are and to ask for your participation in future steps. One last huge thank you to Rick Evers for the great leading of the conversation here and everyone else who participated. With that, thanks so much, everyone, and I'll leave you on to the rest of your day.